"That place is where people go to die," the man said to me. I only asked him for directions. My two friends and I were planning on taking a little road trip during summer in between semesters of school. We only had a couple weeks of freedom, so we were going to take advantage of it. We'd always enjoyed sharing spooky stories and urban legends with each other. We were super fans of horror, especially if it had some truth behind it. So naturally, our ideal destination for this trip would be a haunted location within driving distance. When we were trying to decide where to go, Allison had made the first suggestion. "Oh, what about Redtail? It's only like a 3-hour drive and you guys already know the lore surrounding the place." "I don't," Ethan interjected. "What? How do you not?" Allison snapped at him. "About the Nazis? Carter, I know you've heard of it." I shrugged. "I'm lost." "Wow, okay, well," Allison went on, "you know how after World War II, a bunch of Nazis fled to South America?" Ethan and I nodded. "Well, apparently some of them came to the States as well, and they couldn't just go to some crowded town or city, so they built their own town, Redtail. Redtail Flow is the full name, I think. Most of them were scientists or high-ranking military officials, and supposedly some experiment they were conducting killed most of them, but there's still some people living there today." She had piqued our curiosity, so she continued. "Some say the place is now haunted by their spirits, and people have witnessed the ghosts of the Nazis past," she said in an exaggerated voice while lifting her arms and twiddling her fingers for an added spooky effect. Long story short, we decided to go. The town was located at a pretty high elevation along the northern border of New Mexico. We had to cross state lines to get there, but that wasn't a big deal. There were no Airbnbs or major hotel chains within 50 miles of the place. We called around town trying to get through to anyone. A lot of the lines were dead or disconnected. Finally, someone answered and agreed to let us stay in his guest house for $20 per night, which was sufficiently affordable. We transferred 3 nights worth of money to him in exchange for directions and instructions on how to get inside his place. The town wasn't listed on Google Maps or any other electronic GPS system, but Allison had an old paper map that would help us get there. We took my truck and headed to Redtail. After about 2 hours in, the paved road became foreign to my tires, as dirt and gravel was now our new medium. We stopped for gas maybe 45 minutes from our destination, the smallest gas station I'd ever seen. Taped on the gas pump was a piece of paper with crude handwriting that read, "Please pay inside." I walked into the shop, no bigger than my own bedroom, and was greeted by a wrinkled, leathery man. "How you doing, kid? Gas, is it?" Yes, sir." As he swiped my credit card, he asked, "So, where are you headed on this beautiful day?" Me and my friends are going up to Redtail. Isn't it right up this road going north a little over a half hour from here?" He stiffened and grimaced simultaneously. My card was still in his hand, which was now shaking. "Now why the hell would you want to get yourself in there? That place is no good." "Yeah," I responded a little uneasily. "My friends and I are sort of into, creepy history stuff. And with all the myths about the Nazis, that place ain't some museum, kid. His eyes were wide and face was reddening. That place was never home to no Nazis. That's all bullshit. Something evil lives there. It consumes a person's soul and spits it out all mangled like. I didn't know how to respond. He handed me my card back and left me with a final warning. He leaned toward me, as if to emphasize his point. That place is where people go to die. I said nothing as I backed out of the doorway and advanced towards my car. I pumped my gas silently before getting back in the truck. After I drove off, I told Allison and Ethan what the man told me. "Wow," Ethan said. "An old man warning us about an old town we're going to. That's some cheesy 80s horror movie shit right there." We all laughed. "Honestly, that makes me more excited to go," Allison said as she grabbed my hand. We'd been dating for almost 2 years, but luckily, Ethan never felt like a third wheel. We'd all been friends since elementary school, and Ethan never let me forget that Allison had a crush on him first in 3rd grade. That son of a bitch. About 30 minutes later, we drove past a large green sign with white lettering that read, "City Limits, Redtail Flow, Population Unknown," where I assume there used to be a number. Someone had graffitied the word unknown on top of it. "Redtail Flow," Ethan repeated after reading the sign. "You know, it reads more like Native Americans named it, not a bunch of Germans." We all laughed a little and I responded, "True. So either we are going to an almost abandoned Nazi town or an almost abandoned town built on an ancient burial ground. Either way, I like our odds of finding something creepy." "What does flow even mean?" Ethan asked. "Probably the last name of someone who founded the town," Allison answered. "Ah, yes," I joked. "Mr. Flo, the most German name I've ever heard." As we approached the town, I felt as if we had stepped back into time, into the Old West. Though we were basically on top of a mountain, it was not too cold, rather warm actually. Dirt and sand composed the roadways, while tumbleweeds greeted us every half mile. On the way to the town square, we had only seen 1 or 2 houses which looked more like abandoned shacks. The rest of the land lay empty. It was just how I imagined it would look. Town Square was engraved on a large piece of stone that sat on the side of the roadway. The square was more of a strip, no longer than a quarter mile. On each side of the dirt road were a couple shops, a restaurant, a bar, and a drugstore. And, well, that was about it. Some of the buildings looked abandoned despite having an open sign in the window. There were no people walking down the gravel sidewalks. There were no cars driving through or parked along the street. It looked sincerely abandoned. "Alright, I'm a little unsettled," I admitted. "Allie, how do I get to the house from here?" One sec." She pulled out the handwritten directions from the glove box that the man had given us over the phone. "Okay, once you enter town, yada yada, town square, alright, go past the drugstore and make the first left in a half mile on Hitchier Road. Then, the driveway will be on our right another half mile. The mailbox is red and says FS in white lettering." As we pulled away from town square, I noticed in my rearview mirror that a few people were exiting some of the buildings we just passed. They walked out slowly and seemed to all congregate in the middle of the street. They were just staring in the direction of my car as I drove away. I didn't say anything to Allison or Ethan because I didn't think much of it at the time. As we trekked on towards the house, we passed a couple of other driveways, though we couldn't see where any of them led. The road became narrower, as if it was meant for only one lane of traffic. "Carter!" Ethan cried out while grabbing my shoulder from the back seat, his other hand outstretched, pointing towards the side of the road. "That's it, the red mailbox." Sure enough, there it was, bright red with FS painted on the side rather neatly. I turned the car and began scaling the long driveway, making my way through a couple bends and turns. When the house came into view, we realized it was more of a cabin. It stood old and weathered, a small wooden cottage with a couple of stairs leading up to the front porch. "Who wants to bet this place has no electricity or running water?" Ethan remarked. "The guy on the phone said it did," Allison said with a touch of defeat in her voice. "We should check it out first before we bring our stuff in," I said. We crossed the mix of dirt and overgrown grass and ascended the stairs leading to the front door. Allison grabbed a key from under an empty flower pot that sat on the front porch, exactly where the man said it would be. She unlocked the door and we made our way in. It smelled like an ancient library. It was relatively dark inside, the only light seeping in from the cracks in the closed blinds. We figured out the electricity worked after I pulled a string in the center of the living room, turning on a single light bulb. The living room was made up of a long dining room-like table with 6 chairs to accompany it. They were all wooden, matching the interior and exterior of the structure. There was no kitchen, but there was a mini fridge. The other 2 rooms were bedrooms, each with one mattress adorned with what seemed to be clean sheets. I opened all the blinds and let the late sun's light pour through the glass panes. "Hey, there's water too," Ethan called out from the only bathroom, sounding surprised. "We're in the clear, gang." We grabbed our small amount of luggage and settled into our bedrooms. The sun was setting, so we decided to stay in tonight and we'd head into town tomorrow morning. We had brought a couple of board games and a 24-pack of beer to help pass the time. "Come on, I've landed on Boardwalk like 6 fucking times," Ethan yelled at Allison. "Sorry, dude," she said, taking the beer bottle away from her lips. "Rules are rules. At least you're not in jail again." The Monopoly game was quickly growing heated. Along with it, we were quickly becoming intoxicated. "If I go bankrupt because of you, I swear." Ethan's empty threat was cut short by 3 heavy pounds on our front door. We all stared at it like we'd never heard someone knock on a door before. We all flinched a little bit. I'll get it," I said, rising from my chair. I walked over to the front door, almost tiptoeing for some reason. I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door to peek outside. It was dark, very dark. I couldn't see anything, so I flipped a couple switches on the wall next to me until the outside light came on. Once illuminated, I could see there was nothing on the porch. I pulled the door open wider and poked my head out to look in all directions, but saw nothing. I turned to Ethan and Allison, whose attention was already on me. I don't see anyone," I said. Allison stood up and approached the door with a puzzled look on her face. Her eyes were locked on something outside. She pointed. There. Someone is standing there. I squinted a little and looked out into the darkness. My heart sank a little once I saw what she did. Somebody was standing maybe 100 feet away from the porch, and it seemed like they were looking in our direction. "Hey!" I shouted at the figure. "What are you doing?" The outline of the person neither moved, swayed, nor responded. Allison hastily shut the door. We stood in quiet panic for a moment. "Should we call the police?" she said. "I doubt this town even has a police station," Ethan said. I reached for the knob to open the door back up, just a crack at first. I didn't see anyone, so I swung the door open yet again. Whatever was there was gone, and Allison saw that as well. "I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing," she said. "Maybe they had the wrong house and got embarrassed. I don't know. But the front door is going to be locked, the side door is boarded up completely, and all the windows can't be opened. We're safe. We'll be fine. You still have the key, right?" I asked Allison, who nodded in response. "Good, okay," I said. "Let's just finish up this game tomorrow night. I think we've had enough to drink. We should probably just hit the sack so we can get up early tomorrow." The others agreed. I could tell we were all a little on edge. We cleaned up our bottles and settled into our rooms, all while sneaking glances outside to make sure no one was there. We didn't exactly have anything to protect ourselves with, besides chairs and bottles we could throw at an intruder. Ethan said goodnight and headed into his room, as Allison and I settled into our own. Once under the covers, we exchanged a few good nights before we drifted off. When I got up the next morning, I noticed 3 things were missing: my keys, my truck, and Ethan. I did the math. Allison and I figured he must have run into town to pick up breakfast for us. I thought it was strange though. I've never let him borrow my car before, let alone take it without asking me first. We began to worry as hours passed. It was nearing 2 p.m., and we had awoken at 8 a.m. That means Ethan had my car out for over 6 hours. Something wasn't right. I suggested to Allison we take a walk into town to see if he's there. She agreed. We walked down the dusty road, admiring the beauty of the place. Though it was in the middle of nowhere, and though it was allegedly haunted grounds, it was quite picturesque, a scene straight out of Westworld. As we walked, we held hands, tossed sand at each other's feet playfully, and found the occasional rock to be kicked until it fell off the road. As we neared closer to the center of town, Allison pointed out a woman walking in our direction on the other side of the road. As the distance between us and the woman shrank, Allison spoke up to her. "Hey there," she said in a genuine friendly tone. The woman wore dusty overalls that tucked into her boots. She looked like she had been working on a farm. She responded neither to Allison's greeting nor my wave that followed it. She did acknowledge us though, in a way. She stared at us. She stared at us like she was seeing a ghost. Her eyes were wide. It didn't quite look like she was scared of us, however. No, not scared. More of a surprised expression. After we passed her, we walked in silence for a moment. "Carter," Allison whispered. "She stopped walking. She's staring at us." I almost became immobile from shock. but Allison's tug at my hand helped me keep my stride. I glanced over my shoulder, trying to be as nonchalant as possible. She was standing in the middle of the road, just glaring at us. I turned back to Allison. Maybe they haven't seen an outsider in a while. Yeah, maybe, she replied, unconvinced. They act like they've never seen someone from outside of their town. Once we made it to the town square, we stood in the middle of the road looking around at all the buildings. We hadn't seen my truck or any sign of Ethan. It's impossible to leave the town without passing through the square, so we were determined to find someone who had seen Ethan leave. The largest building in town was the diner. The large letters rooted into the front of the structure read, "Food 24/7. Odd name for a restaurant, Allison said without taking her eyes off the sign. No kidding, creativity does not seem to be running rampant here, I said in a hushed tone as if someone were listening. We walked inside and we were welcomed to an empty diner, similar to those you'd see in the 1950s. We hopped up on 2 bar stools and waited for someone to see us. A couple minutes passed, so I called back, "Hello?" to the open kitchen, but got no response. And just then, a patron came through the door and sat down in a booth. He was looking at us. Allison and I shot each other a glance. "Hey there," she said to the man. "Did you happen to see a red truck come through this morning?" He didn't move or blink. He just looked at us. Another came into the diner. In fact, it was this same woman who we saw walking down the road. She kept her eyes on us as she took a seat, sharing the booth with the man. Then another person came in, then another, and another. All of them had their eyes locked on us from the moment they entered the restaurant. They all quietly took their seats and continued to stare. Allison's delicate voice tried to ask the question again to the new patrons, though she was visibly scared. Have any of you seen a red truck?" No response. No movement. "Allison, I think we should leave," I said as I stood from my bar stool. The diner was almost full of people at this point. It was as if the sole reason any of them came in was because they knew we were there. They didn't have guns pointed at us. They didn't look angry. They didn't look like they wanted to hurt us. Even so, I felt a real sense of danger around them, like their stares would make me drop dead in an instant. They all just looked stunned. Their eyes were wide and their mouth was barely open. It created an unmatchable amount of dread within me, the truest sense of terror I've ever felt. We slowly walked out of the restaurant, and in an unspoken agreement, we began a light sprint to get out of there and back to the cabin. I don't know if Allison turned back to look, but I did. They were all in the street. They were all staring, and no one was moving. Allison and I were walking up to the driveway to the cabin. My heavy breathing and rapid heartbeat were all I could focus on. Before Allison and I could even think about what had happened, we noticed my truck sitting in the driveway, right where I had parked it. "That son of a bitch, where did he go?" I said as I advanced towards the front porch. "He had to have gone the other way," Allison pointed out. "Otherwise he would have passed us on the way back." We climbed the stairs and barged through the door. "Where the fuck did you go?" I said, getting straight to the point. "Excuse me?" he said. Where the fuck did you go? I've been sitting here forever waiting for you two asshats to come back. What have you been smoking? Allison intervened. We left for town on foot because you never came back with the truck. Ethan looked truly surprised and then amused. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Crazy Pants. I get it now, you're pulling my leg. You almost got me. I didn't even hear the truck pull in. You two did a good job. He started to clap his hands together. I grabbed them mid-clap. We aren't pulling your leg, idiot. When we woke up, you were gone. The truck was gone. We waited for 6 hours and you never came back. We went to town, just now got back, and we find out you and the truck are here. What are we supposed to think of that? Now his amused expression grew to one of alarm. I didn't take your car, dude. When I got up this morning, you two were still gone, he said. Carter, when I woke up last night and talked to you, you said you were taking it out with Allison for a surprise. You never came back. Wait, what? Allison said. No, I started. No, I didn't wake up last night. I most certainly didn't have that conversation with you. Yes, you did. It was dark, but I know it was you. It was sometime in the middle of the night. I heard a thud or something, so I came out of my room, and you were standing in the doorway with the keys. My eyebrows slowly rose in confusion, but he continued. You said you had a surprise for Allison, that you saw a nice place on the way into town to park the truck and look at the stars. I asked if you were good to drive, and you said you sobered up enough. Ring any bells? Allison looked at me, then back at Ethan. We didn't go look at stars, and I would have woken up if he left the bed. And I would have woken up if you left, I directed the comment at Allison. We all looked at each other in suspicion, in bewilderment, in panic. Momentarily, I felt as if I was in a room with two strangers, and I'm sure they felt the same way. After our three-way standoff had subsided somewhat, we took our seats around the Monopoly board, even though we had no intention of playing. We sat there speaking for a little while, passing and catching glimpses at one another. Our minds were reeling. The silence was broken when I told them what had been on my mind all day. I don't think I locked the door last night.